I never told anyone how many nights. I went to sleep hungry, so my mother could take her heart medicine on time. My name is Claire Whitman, and at 32 years old, I was still wearing the same pair of shoes I'd owned since college, the sole peeling away from the left one, held together with glue and prayer. I worked as a receptionist at Harrington & Cole, a law firm in downtown Boston that billed more in an hour than I made in a week. Every morning, I'd walk past the parking lot full of German cars and slip in through the back door before anyone could see the tape wrapped around my shoe. "You're early again," said Mr. Dawson, the office manager, not even looking up from his phone. "I like getting a head start," I said. The truth was simpler. I couldn't afford the bus twice a day, so I walked 40 minutes each way, rain or shine. My mother's medication cost $412 a month. My rent was $800. My paycheck was barely enough to cover both. If I ate nothing but rice for 30 days straight, I didn't complain. I'd learned a long time ago that complaining didn't pay bills. That morning, as I bent down to pick up a dropped folder by the executive elevator, I heard heels click behind me. "Is that super glue on your shoe?" I turned around. It was Vanessa Cole, the managing partner's daughter, Chanel bag, perfect blowout, and a smile that never once reached her eyes. "It does the job," I said quietly, standing up straight. She laughed, not with me, at me. "Wow, and you work at the front desk of this firm. Interesting choice, dressing like that." A few people near the coffee station turned to look. I felt my face burn, but I said nothing. I just picked up the folder and walked to my desk. What Vanessa didn't know, what nobody in that building knew, was that 3 nights a week, after my shift ended, I sat at the public library typing out a business plan on a laptop I'd bought secondhand. An idea I hadn't told a single soul about. Not my mother, not my coworkers, not even myself, some days, when the doubt got too loud. Because if it worked, it would change everything. But that same afternoon, an email landed in my inbox, from the firm's HR department. Subject line: *immediate meeting requested Ms. Whitman. ***. My stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything wrong, or had I? I knocked on the glass door of the HR office, with my hands shaking. Inside sat Mrs. Alvarez, the HR director, and beside her, arms crossed, sat Vanessa Cole. "Please, sit down, Claire," Mrs. Alvarez said, her voice unusually gentle. I sat, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. "There's been a complaint," Mrs. Alvarez continued, sliding a paper across the desk, "about missing documents from the Hargrove file. Confidential documents." My stomach turned to ice. I never touched the Hargrove file. I don't even have clearance for it. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice sugar-sweet and sharp as glass. "That's strange, because the last person seen near that cabinet was you. Yesterday around 5. I was refilling the printer paper," I said. "Anyone can check the hallway camera." "The camera in that hallway," Vanessa said, examining her nails, "has been broken for a week. Convenient, isn't it?" I looked at Mrs. Alvarez, silently begging her to see through this. But her face was unreadable. "Until this is resolved," Mrs. Alvarez said carefully, "we're going to need you to hand over your access badge and take unpaid leave." "Unpaid?" My voice cracked. "Ma'am, please, I need this job. My mother's medication. That's not something the firm can factor into a security investigation," Vanessa cut in, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. I wanted to scream that I'd never stolen a single paperclip in my life, that I'd spent 3 years at that firm arriving before the sun rose. But I'd also learned that when you're the girl with the taped up shoes, nobody rushes to believe you. I handed over my badge with trembling fingers and walked out past the same coffee station where, hours earlier, people had laughed at my shoes. Now they just stared in silence. Outside, the cold Boston wind hit my face, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry, not for the job, but for my mother, who was waiting for a medicine bottle I no longer knew how I'd afford. That night, I sat at the library with my old laptop, staring at the business plan I'd been building in secret for 2 years. Bakery recipes passed down from my late grandmother, a brand name A logo I'd sketched 100 times. It was supposed to be my someday plan, not something I needed tomorrow. But as I closed the laptop, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I saw what happened today. I know who really took the Hargrove file. We need to talk, but not on the phone. My hands went cold. Who was this? I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Someone who's tired of watching them get away with things. Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m., Riverside Diner on 4th. Come alone, I barely slept that night. Every version of tomorrow played in my head, a trap, a scam, or maybe, just maybe, the truth. The next morning, I walked into the small diner, my stomach in knots. An older man sat in the corner booth, wearing a security guard's jacket I recognized from the building. Frank. I'd passed him at the front desk 100 times and never once learned his name. Sit, he said quietly. I don't have much time before my shift. You know something about the Hargrove file? Frank glanced around before speaking. I've worked security at Harrington & Cole for 11 years. I've seen a lot. 2 nights before you got called into that office, I saw Miss Vanessa Cole in the file room after hours, alone, with a USB drive. My breath caught. Why didn't you say anything? Because the camera in that hallway wasn't broken by accident, sweetheart. Somebody made it look broken. And people like me, we don't get believed either. Not against a Cole. Then why are you telling me? Frank's eyes softened. Because I watched you walk in early every single morning for 3 years, rain or shine, in shoes that should have been thrown out a year ago. You never once complained. You never once looked down on anyone, including me. That matters more than you think. He slid a folded paper across the table. A printed log of the buildings. Badge swipe records. This shows Vanessa's badge access to that file. Room at 9:47 p.m. Yours never did. I kept a copy before anyone could delete it. My hands trembled as I held the paper. This was real evidence, but who would believe a fired receptionist over the managing partner's daughter? They'll never listen to me, I whispered. Frank leaned back. Maybe not now. But people like Vanessa always slip eventually. And when they do, you'll want proof in your hands, not just anger in your heart. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it into my bag like it was made of gold. Walking home that day, my phone buzzed again, this time, an email. Subject line. Regarding your business plan submission Blackstone Community Grant. I froze. I'd submitted that application 7 months ago and completely forgotten about it. My hands shook as I opened it. My eyes scanned the email twice before the words actually registered. Dear Ms. Whitman, we are pleased to inform you that your application for the Blackstone Community Small Business Grant has been selected as a finalist. Please arrange an in-person interview at your earliest convenience. I sat down on the curb right there on the sidewalk, laptop bag still on my shoulder, and read it a 3rd time. A finalist. Out of what I later learned were over 600 applicants. For a moment, I let myself smile, a real one. The kind I hadn't allowed myself in months. Then, reality crept back in. A grant interview meant nothing if I couldn't even pay for my mother's medicine this week. That evening, I sat by my mother's bed, watching her chest rise and fall a little too slowly for comfort. You seem far away today, Claire, she said, patting the seat beside her. I almost told her everything, the firing, the false accusation, Frank, the grant email. But she'd already sacrificed so much of her own health worrying about mine. So instead I just said, just tired, Mom. Long week. She smiled weakly. You've always worked too hard for people who don't see your worth. Little did she know how true that was about to become. 3 days later, I walked into the Blackstone grant office in a blouse I'd ironed twice and shoes I'd scrubbed clean, praying no one would notice the crack along the sole. Across the table sat 3 interviewers, and my stomach dropped when I recognized the man in the center, Richard Cole, Vanessa's father, managing partner of Harrington & Cole, and apparently, on the grant selection board. His eyes flicked toward me with mild recognition, then confusion. Ms. Whitman? You worked at my firm. I did, sir, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Until 3 days ago. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face, but he said nothing more, simply gesturing for me to begin my pitch. For the next 15 minutes, I spoke about my grandmother's bakery recipes, the community-focused pricing model, the plan to hire from local shelters. I spoke like it was the only chance I'd ever get, because it was. When I finished, the room was silent. Then the woman beside Richard Cole leaned forward. This is one of the strongest business models we've reviewed this year. Richard Cole said nothing. He simply stared at me, something unreadable behind his eyes. As I left the building, my phone buzzed one more time. A text from Frank. Vanessa found out I met with you. She's telling her father you stole company secrets to build your own business. Be ready, she's not done. Asterisk. I read Frank's message 3 times. My hands going cold despite the warm afternoon sun. Stole company secrets. Asterisk. The accusation was almost laughable. Except nothing about my life right now felt like it had room for laughing. 2 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Richard Cole himself. Ms. Whitman, I need you to come to my office. Today, if possible. My heart sank. This was it, the moment they'd tried to bury me for good. When I arrived, Richard Cole's office looked exactly as intimidating as I remembered. Mahogany desk. City skyline view. Awards lining the walls. Vanessa stood beside her father's chair, arms crossed, wearing the same smug expression she'd worn the day she had me fired. My daughter tells me your business plan closely resembles a proposal our firm's client submitted last year, Richard said, his voice cold and clipped. A proposal you would have had access to before you were let go for the Hargrove file incident. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking but firm. My business plan is based on my grandmother's recipes. I've been working on it for 2 years, long before I ever touched a single client file. Convenient timing, don't you think? Vanessa said with a smirk. Fired 1 week, grant finalist the next. I felt the walls closing in until I remembered the folded paper still sitting in my bag. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I think it's time. We talked about what actually happened with the Hargrove file. I placed the batch swipe log on the desk. Richard's eyes moved from the paper to his daughter, whose smirk faltered for just a second. This shows the file room was accessed at 9:47 p.m. The night before I was accused, I said, by a badge that wasn't mine. The room went silent. Richard picked up the paper, reading slowly, his jaw tightening with every line. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. From someone who's watched your daughter get away with things for years. Because no one dared question her, I said. I'm done being the person people blame because I'm easy to blame. Vanessa's face drained of color. Dad, this is fake. She's lying. Vanessa. Richard's voice cut through the room like a blade. Sit down. For the first time since I'd met him. Richard Cole looked at his daughter. The way he should have looked at her from the beginning with suspicion. I want the truth, he said. Right now. Vanessa opened her mouth to speak. But before a single word came out, the office door swung open. Mrs. Alvarez from HR walked in, her face pale, holding a laptop under her arm. Behind her stood Frank, still in his security uniform. His expression calm, but resolute. Mr. Cole, I think you need to see this, Mrs. Alvarez said. Frank came to me this morning with security footage. He'd backed up before it was supposedly lost. I verified it myself. She set the laptop on the desk and pressed play. The grainy footage showed the file room. Time-stamped 9:47 p.m., and there, clear as day, was Vanessa Cole slipping a folder into her bag before plugging in a USB drive. The room fell into a heavy silence. I kept a backup on an external drive, Frank said. Figured one day, the truth would matter more than staying quiet. Richard Cole's hands were trembling now. Not with confusion, but with fury. You let an innocent woman get fired. You let her lose her income. Her reputation for what? Jealousy. Dad, I can explain, Vanessa's voice cracked. I don't want an explanation, Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. I want you out of this building now. Vanessa looked at me, eyes glassy with disbelief, as if she still couldn't process that the girl in the shoes had just dismantled everything she'd built her life on. Richard turned to me, his expression heavy with something I hadn't expected from him. Genuine shame. Ms. Whitman, I owe you an apology I can't put into words. You lost your job, your income, possibly your mother's medication, because of my daughter's actions and my own failure to question her. Apologies don't pay medical bills, Mr. Cole, I said quietly. But thank you for finally listening. He nodded slowly. Then let me do more than apologize. Your position is reinstated, with full back pay. And Ms. Whitman, I'll personally recommend your business for the Blackstone Grant's top funding tier. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Weeks of humiliation, fear, and sleepless nights collapsed into this single moment of vindication. But as I turned to leave, Frank touched my arm gently. There's one more thing you should know, he said, glancing toward the hallway. Before Vanessa found out I gave you that badge log, she made a phone call to someone at Blackstone, trying to get your grant application thrown out completely. My stomach dropped. What kind of call? Frank's jaw tightened. The kind that could still cost you everything, if we don't get there first. My heart pounded as I processed Frank's words. We need to get to Blackstone, now. Richard Cole, still visibly shaken from what he'd just learned about his daughter, surprised me by grabbing his coat. I'm coming with you. This started under my roof. I intend to help end it the right way. The drive to the Blackstone Grant office felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario the grant pulled. My name blacklisted, months of secret work erased because of one woman's spite. When we walked in, the same panel from my interview sat behind closed doors in a meeting. Richard didn't wait for permission. He knocked once and walked straight in. I need 2 minutes, he said firmly. This concerns a finalist named Claire Whitman. The woman who had praised my business model earlier looked up, surprised. Mr. Cole? We were actually just discussing her application. My stomach twisted. Has something happened? She hesitated, glancing at her colleagues. We received an anonymous call yesterday, claiming your business plan was built using stolen client information from Harrington and Cole. We were required to investigate before moving forward. That call was made by my daughter, Richard said, his voice steady despite the visible tension in his jaw. Out of jealousy and personal vendetta, I have security footage and internal documentation proving Ms. Whitman's innocence and my daughter's misconduct. The room went quiet as he placed a folder on the table, copies of the badge log and a written statement. The lead interviewer studied the documents carefully, then looked at me. Ms. Whitman, I'm sorry you had to go through this. Fortunately, our board already independently verified your recipes and business timeline through public grant records. You submitted 7 months ago, well before this incident. Your application was never actually at risk of disqualification, but I appreciate you clearing the record. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees nearly buckled. So, what happens now? I asked quietly. The woman smiled, the first real smile I'd seen since this nightmare began. Now, Ms. Whitman, we'd like to officially welcome you as this year's top grant recipient. $50,000 in funding, plus mentorship and retail space in downtown Boston. I pressed my hand to my mouth, tears finally breaking free, not from fear this time, but from something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. As we left the building, Richard turned to me. Vanessa will face consequences at the firm, and I'll ensure this never touches your name again. But there's something else you should know before you celebrate. I looked at him, cautious. What is it? His expression turned serious. The client whose files Vanessa actually stole wants to meet the woman who exposed her. 2 days later, I sat in a quiet conference room, still adjusting to the whirlwind my life had become. Across the table sat a woman in her 60s, elegant and composed, introduced to me only as Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, one of Harrington and Cole's oldest and most valuable clients. I asked Richard to arrange this meeting, she said, folding her hands. I wanted to meet the woman whose honesty exposed what almost destroyed my family's trust in that firm. I sat quietly, unsure what to say. Vanessa Cole stole confidential documents from my estate file. Mrs. Whitfield continued. Documents that could have been sold to competitors, costing my family millions. When Richard told me a fired receptionist's integrity was the reason, the truth came out. I insisted on meeting you myself. I only wanted to clear my name, I said honestly. I never expected any of this. She smiled gently. That's precisely why I trust you. People who do the right thing without expecting a reward are the only ones worth rewarding. She slid a folder across the table. I'd like to personally invest in your bakery, not as charity, as a business partner who believes in you. I stared at the numbers on the page, my hands trembling. It was more than I'd ever dared to dream of. 3 months later, I stood in front of a small shop on a quiet Boston street, the golden letters above the door catching the afternoon light. Asterisk Whitman's Kitchen EST. In honor of Grandma Rose. Asterisk asterisk. My mother sat inside at a corner table. Her medication no longer a monthly crisis, but a small, manageable line item in a life that finally had room to breathe. She watched me tie my apron with tears in her eyes. You did this, she whispered, after everything they put you through. No, Mom, I said, glancing down at my new shoes, sturdy, simple, and paid for without fear. We did this. Every hungry night, every long walk, every insult I swallowed. It all led here. As for Vanessa, she was quietly dismissed from Harrington and Cole within the week. Her father unwilling to protect actions that had nearly cost the firm one of its biggest clients. I heard she moved out of state, chasing a fresh start far from the world that once revolved around her. I never sought revenge. I never had to. Because sometimes, the sweetest justice isn't destroying the person who tried to break you, it's simply rising so high, with your head held so proud, that they're forced to watch you shine in the very light they once tried to take away.